Ukraine just scored a massive victory against Russia. Over the weekend, the country's drones hit an explosives factory, taking out key supplies Russian President Vladimir Putin relies upon to batter Ukraine's forces. The aerial strike is the latest in a series of massive assaults Ukraine has conducted against Russia's supply chain on Russian territory. However, Ukraine isn't having it all its own way. Russia has responded with drone and missile attacks that are as devastating, only in a different way. On April 5th, Military reported that an overnight Ukrainian drone attack had targeted Promsintez, which is believed to be one of the largest explosives manufacturing plants Putin has at his disposal. Brief footage of the aftermath of the attack was shared on the Astra Telegram channel. This video, which only lasts about 12 seconds, appeared to show an explosion at the plant, causing flames to shoot up into the skies. As the footage draws to a close, another loud explosion is heard, indicating that Ukraine's airstrike hit multiple targets at the facility. Russia has confirmed the attack. The governor of the Samara region told local media that an attack had taken place on the industrial facility, causing a fire to break out. However, he claims that Ukraine inflicted no casualties in the strike. But casualties were never the intention. The morning after the strike, Ukraine's military intelligence agency, the Secret Security Service of Ukraine, or SBU, took credit for the attack and explained what it had achieved. SBU drones hit the Promsintez plant in the Russian Federation, which produces explosives, said the SBU to the Kyiv Post. At night, SBU drones attacked the Promsintez plant in Chapayevsk, Samara region. This plant is one of the leading manufacturers of industrial explosives, ammonol, ammonite, granulite in the Russian Federation and the Commonwealth of Independent States. The SBU claims its assault halted operations at the plant, stopping it from producing the explosives and supporting equipment Putin has been using to bombard Ukraine since he invaded in February 2022. It's unknown how long that halt will last. And that's not all. On the same night, the Kyiv Independent reports that Ukraine also attacked a factory in Saransk, which is in the Moravia Oblast. That attack targeted a facility responsible for producing fiber optics, including a building owned by a company that's only identified as Fiber Optic Systems. Not a lot is known about that company, other than it being identified as the main producer of Russian fiber optics. Ukraine just delivered a massive 1-2 punch to Putin's war machine. But how did Ukraine manage to pull off this pair of strikes? And why did it target these facilities in particular? With regards to how, the SBU has already revealed that it used drones in its assaults. Those drones managed to cause at least 20 explosions, along with multiple fires, at the Promsintez plant, with one source telling Military that the SBU continues to conduct targeted operations against Russian enterprises that are part of the military-industrial complex and produce weapons for the war against Ukraine. Such facilities are absolutely legitimate targets. They're also targets nestled deep inside Russia, meaning the SBU had to use a special kind of drone to hit them in the first place. It's unknown which drones the SBU used to conduct the attacks, though there are several possibilities. The UJ-22 Airborne is a likely contender. Shaped like an old fighter jet, the drone has a single engine and can carry either an internal warhead, allowing it to act as a kamikaze drone, or several bombs that it drops from the air. All told, the drone has a payload of up to 44 pounds, more than enough explosive force to cause serious issues at an industrial facility. The drone is capable of travelling up to 500 miles, placing the Promsintez plant within its range, and has already been used by Ukraine to carry out attacks on Moscow as early into Putin's invasion as February 2023. Another possible contender is the Morok, which has a 186-mile range. That means Ukraine would have needed to launch this drone from its borders to come close to hitting Promsintez, which seems unlikely. The drone also has a payload of 6.6 pounds, making it more effective for targeting infantry troop deployments than industrial targets. Far more powerful, and thus more likely as an attacking force inside Russia, is the UJ-26 Beaver. With its sleek fuselage and inverted tail, the drone is among the more unique long-range weapons that Ukraine has in its arsenal. It's also capable of delivering a similar 44-pound payload as the UJ-22 Airborne, while travelling as deep as 620 miles into Russian territory. The drone has been confirmed in the use of several Ukrainian attacks against Moscow and other Russian targets. The AQ-400 Scythe, which can travel for 465 miles and deliver a 70-pound payload, might have also been used. There's also the Lord, produced by Swiss company Destinus, which has a similar range and payload. Odds are that the attacks in both Promsintez and Saransk used a combination of different drones, though the SBU may have had another option. On March 26, the BBC reported that Ukraine's engineers were hard at work on the development of a new long-range drone with capabilities unlike any other in the country's arsenal. That drone, dubbed Raybird, is capable of flying non-stop for 20 hours and can travel up to 620 miles to hit a target. That would make it one of the longest range drones Ukraine has available. It could use Raybird to devastate targets in Moscow and the surrounding areas to hurt Russia's supply chain. Ukraine has also announced that it's working on yet another drone, this one with a range of 1,860 miles that would allow it to attack targets as deep into Russia as Siberia. While it's not yet clear whether Ukraine may have used one of these more modern drones to hit Promsintez and Saransk, what is evident is that Ukraine just took out a pair of very important facilities. Starting with Promsintez, the company owns 13 workshops across nearly 500 acres of territory, according to Militani. Many of those plants are automated, which explains why no casualties were reported from either side in Ukraine's attack. That automation is needed because the plants deal with hazardous chemicals that are too dangerous for human intervention. All told, Promsintez employs 1,300 people, reinforcing its position as one of the largest explosives manufacturers in Russia. Most of what it makes is used in Russia's mining industry, which alone makes it a great target for Ukraine. Russia relies on mining for some of its most valuable products. For instance, 2024 saw the Russian gold mining company Polyus record $7.3 billion in revenue, which was an 11% increase from the previous year. And though Russian coal companies are operating more sporadically than they have in the past, they're also still valuable to Russia's economy. The Coal Hub says that these coal mining groups combined to generate $3.78 billion of profit in 2023. Those same companies are now working at a loss. They lost $1.14 billion in 2024, but they're both still vital when providing for Russia's energy needs and delivering a product the country can export when it's not under the weight of massive Western sanctions. The Promsintez strike may have just forced a halt to Russian mining operations, and that has the potential to cost Putin hundreds of millions of dollars. But beyond the mining-focused explosive produced at its factories, Promsintez also makes TNT. TNT is used to make artillery shells and similar munitions, which Russia has used to batter Ukraine throughout Putin's war. Back in March 2024, Russia was firing 10,000 artillery shells per day at Ukraine. It has also ramped up its production to the point where it was producing 3 times as many artillery shells for itself than the US and Europe combined were sending to Ukraine. CNN estimated at the time that Russia was building 250,000 artillery munitions monthly, amounting to 3 million per year. By contrast, the US and Europe combined to send 1.2 million shells annually to Ukraine, putting Russia in a position where it could rattle off 10,000 shells per day, while Ukraine could only fire 2,000. The Promsintez strike may have just put a massive dent in Russia's artillery shell production chain. It's one of the country's main producers of TNT, and the fires that have erupted at the plant may be burning those explosives up, causing chain reactions that lead to more explosions and fires in the process. Costing Putin valuable explosives Russia needs to maintain its artillery barrage. Ukraine has just relieved a ton of pressure on its cities and frontline forces with the Promsintez airstrike. But it's the factory attack in Saransk that may have a more long-term impact. The Saransk factory was home to a company named Fiber Optic Systems, and while Promsintez is for explosives manufacturing, Fiber Optic Systems is believed to be the biggest Russian manufacturer of fiber optics. According to The Insider, the fiber optic technologies this company produces are being used to create a new generation of Russian drones. It says there have already been around 200 instances of Russia deploying drones that use fiber optic control cables in attacks against Ukrainian military equipment between November 2024 and April 2025, based on video evidence recovered from the Open Source Intelligence Project, or OSINT. The real numbers may be much higher. Alexei Chadayev, who's the director of the Ushkuy Research Center that builds the KVN drones that use these fiber optic technologies, says Russia has used his drones up to 1,000 times. He's also offered some interesting insight into the drone failure rate, suggesting that between 10 and 20% of Russians' fiber optic drones failed to reach their targets. That's a sacrifice Russia is willing to make because the use of fiber optics in this and similar drones allow Russia to bypass Ukraine's electronic warfare defenses. Even if only 80% of the fiber optic drones achieve successful flight, that's still a barrage of drones against which Ukraine can only defend with more direct anti-air defenses. This information cast a new light on why Ukraine targeted the fiber optics facility in Saransk. It may be struggling to take out Russia's fiber optic drones directly, but if it destroys the facility building the technology that makes those drones possible, it also forces Russia into using drones that are less resistant to electronic warfare. The result is that more of those drones are misdirected or taken out of the skies before they hit Ukrainian targets, ultimately meaning that Ukraine suffers less damage in Russia's constant drone strikes. Of course, creating electronic warfare resistant drones isn't the only use Russia has for its fiber optic technology. As HFCL points out, fiber optics are often used in place of traditional copper wires in more advanced communication devices. That's because fiber optics transmit communications using light, resulting in no electromagnetic fields being developed during transmission. No fields means it's harder for anybody to eavesdrop on a transmission, making fiber optics critical for Russia if it wants to maintain secrecy in Putin's invasion. That lack of electromagnetic field also means Ukraine struggles to interfere with Russian transmissions, making jamming almost impossible. We've already seen what impact this lack of jamming has on the drone front. Ukraine being unable to jam Russian communications on the front line means that it also can't prevent Russia from organizing its ground assaults. Fiber optic technology is also used in the production of modern tanks and armored vehicles, as well as in guided and ballistic missiles. It's needed for intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance systems, such as night vision goggles, and systems that hold recording cameras, such as surveillance drones and recording helmets. Simply put, fiber optics are vital to a modern war machine. Now, Russia is without one of its leading fiber optic producers. If it can't get the Saransk factory up and running again, Ukraine may have just scored a major victory that has far-reaching implications for Russia's effectiveness both in the air and on the ground. That's why this 1-2 punch Ukraine delivered to Russia over the weekend is so impressive. With its left jab, it took out a massive explosives manufacturer that is key to Putin's continuous artillery barrage. And with a sweeping right hook, it devastated a fiber optics company that Russia relies upon for its drones and so much of its military equipment. Worse yet for Putin, this is only the latest volley he's faced within Russia's territory, as Ukraine has been hitting him hard for several weeks. Take its March 20 attack on the Engels air base in the Saratov region as an example. That attack came after Putin followed up promises of a supposed immediate ceasefire on energy infrastructure attacks by hitting a Ukrainian energy facility. Ukraine's response was to target Engels, which is home to several of Russia's long-range nuclear bombers, according to the New York Times, along with massive stores of munitions. Those munitions include the glide bombs Putin has used to devastating effect against Ukraine's energy, military and civilian infrastructure. Russia's defense ministry claimed it shot down 54 Ukrainian drones on the night leading into March 20, though it appears those aerial defenses were ineffective. Explosions racked the airfield, with footage showing large plumes of smoke rising into the skies after the Ukrainian attacks. The Promsintez and Saransk strikes only show us what we already knew thanks to Engels. Russia can't seem to do anything to stop Ukraine's drone assaults. Ukraine has also taken its multifaceted approach to Belgorod, as it faces losing territory in the Russian oblast of Kursk, where Ukraine launched a counter-invasion in August 2024. Like Kursk, that region is just across the border Ukraine shares with Russia, and it's been subjected to a bevy of aerial assaults over the last few weeks. On March 29 alone, CNN reported that Ukraine had attacked 20 villages in Belgorod across a 90-mile strip of territory, with CNN claiming those attacks came as a response to Russia's actions in Kursk. The Ukrainian strategy seems to be to use the Belgorod attacks to force Putin to divert his forces from Kursk, relieving pressure on the few Ukrainian troops who remain in the oblast. It's also likely that this Belgorod diversion will relieve pressure on Ukraine's Sumy region, which has come under increasing fire as Russia reclaims ground in Kursk. Russia, of course, is accusing Ukraine of breaking a ceasefire to which Putin has never stuck. On April 5th, the same day Ukraine launched its attacks against Promsintez and Saransk, Russia's defense ministry claimed that Ukraine struck the country's energy infrastructure 14 times in 24 hours. The intent behind the release of this information is clear. Russia wants to position Ukraine as the country that continues breaking the energy infrastructure ceasefire Putin claimed he agreed to when he spoke with US President Donald Trump in mid-March. The problem for Russia is twofold, as Putin already broke that ceasefire almost as soon as it was announced, with Ukraine, Russia and the US currently locked into negotiations on how and when that ceasefire should be applied. In other words, there is no energy infrastructure ceasefire. There's only the suggestion of one from Putin, which he's now using to try and vilify Ukraine. Putin's second problem is that Ukraine has already rubbished the Russian Defense Ministry's claims. Its military says the statements are fake and disinformation, with Reuters also suggesting that it was unable to verify the legitimacy of Russia's claim. These energy infrastructure strikes may be happening. Ukraine isn't operating under a ceasefire. However, it seems like Russia may be trying to distract the world away from far more successful strikes, such as those in Saransk and against Promsintez, that are causing far more damage to its military. It's worth pointing out that Ukraine isn't having it all its own way. Despite the success of its 2 weekend airstrikes, along with the assaults on Engels and Belgorod, Russia is still hitting Ukraine hard with attacks of its own. For instance, April 5th saw Russia launch a devastating strike of its own, targeting Lviv. But where Ukraine's attack focused on clear Russian military assets, Putin's forces seem to target Ukraine civilians. At least some of the missiles and drones Russia launched at Lviv touched down in a playground, killing 20 people, 9 of whom were children, and injuring a further 75. The head of Lviv's military administration, Alexander Orikul, outlined the impact. Unfortunately, the number of victims of the Russian terrorist attack on April 4th has increased to 20 people, Orikul said in a statement. A 57-year-old man died in the hospital from multiple wounds. He added that doctors in the region were fighting hard for the lives of those impacted. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was quick to condemn the attacks. Russian strikes every day. Every day people are killed. There is only one reason this continues. Russia does not want a ceasefire, and we see it. The whole world sees it, Ukraine's president said. He went on to point out that every Russian promise of a ceasefire ends with missiles, bombs, drones and artillery fire. And as if to prove him right, April 6 brought with it reports of fresh Russian aerial assaults. Overnight, Russia hit Ukraine with 23 missiles and 109 drones, with the aerial assault including Kalibr, Kh-101 and Kh-55 cruise missiles. Russia also sent Iskander-M ballistic missiles, with Ukraine managing to shoot down one of the 6 used in the attack. Of the 109 drones, 53 disappeared and were likely decoys, with Ukraine destroying a further 40, all claimed to be Shahed combat drones made in Iran. The rest seem to have found their targets. What were those targets? More Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, according to the Kyiv Independent. Therein lies the difference that needs to be highlighted between the Ukrainian and Russian approaches. Neither seems to be sticking to any sort of ceasefire, whether proposed or agreed. However, Ukraine is hitting clear military targets. Promsintez makes explosives. The facility in Saransk manufactures fiber optic technology used in a host of Russian weapons. Engels is an air base, with the villages in Belgorod being the only locations Russia can claim were home to civilian targets. Even then, Russia evacuated much of Belgorod when Ukraine launched its Kursk counter-invasion, suggesting those villages may have actually been turned into military fortifications. By contrast, Russia is hitting built-up civilian targets, including playgrounds, to cause terror among Ukraine's citizens. There's a clear difference of approach here. However, Ukraine's approach may be the one that wins out in the end. With the Promsintez and Saransk strikes, Ukraine has just severely weakened Putin's military manufacturing, potentially over the long term. The question now is, how will all of this impact Russia's ongoing attacks in Donetsk and near the Sumy region? Share your thoughts about that with us in the comments section, along with any opinions you have about Ukraine's weekend airstrikes. Are those strikes as impactful as they appear to be? How will Russia replace the lost explosives and fiber optic technology those strikes appear to have destroyed? Tell us what you think below, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for up-to-date commentary on Ukraine's latest victories as it defends itself against Russia. We're an independent source of accurate, up-to-date information on military affairs around the world and greatly appreciate your support.